like to share with you something that's been on my mind. I read this quote by Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta. It really stuck with me. I'd like to share it with you. She said, Lent is a time when we relive the Passion of Christ. Okay, reliving the Passion of Christ, what does that really mean? You know, how do I relive the Passion of Christ? That was the first thing that came to my mind. She goes on and says, let it not be just a time when our feelings are roused, but let it be a change that comes through cooperation with God's grace in real sacrifices of self. And I started thinking about what is a real sacrifice of self. And that led me to the question of, why do we make sacrifices during Lent? Why do we give up something for Lent? Why do we maybe add on something into our lives as a sacrifice that we make to purify ourselves, to become holier or healthier or whatever? It's like, but what is the real why, the real motive behind it? Because the word that really kind of bugged me here was self, a sacrifice of self. Because it occurs to me that a lot of our sacrifices that we do for Lent is for our own benefit. Like, I'm going to not eat meat on Fridays because the church says I shouldn't. Isn't that kind of like doing it for self? The church says I shouldn't, so I need to be obedient. And why would I be obedient? Anybody is obedient because they're afraid of punishment. We need to take this a step further. That's the child's attitude. I'm afraid if I'm disobedient, I'm going to get punished. Rather, to relive the Passion of Christ, we need to be in a mature attitude of spirituality, a mature outlook of what difference does this make in the world? You know, the Passion of Christ was for you and for me and for everybody in the world. How do my sacrifices affect the world? How do my sacrifices that I give up for Lent make a difference in someone else's life? You know, think about what you give up for Lent, or any time of year that you make a sacrifice. Whether it's you're sacrificing fatty foods because you want to get healthier, or you're sacrificing donations that you're making out of your income to the church or to some worthy cause. Why? What is the real motive? How does it change the world? Do we stop to think about that we do want to, in some way, make a difference in other people's lives? The word that comes to my mind is solidarity. This is a word the church uses a lot in talking about the sacrifices that we are called to make. We do it in solidarity with others, and therefore we're doing it in solidarity with Jesus. Because he said in Matthew 25, what you do to the least of these, you do to me, right? In solidarity with others, we give up something. We might eat something less for Lent, and like, for example, I like to go out to dinner a lot. My husband and I like to frequent restaurants. If we give up some of that for Lent, what difference does that make in the world unless we are using the money we saved from not eating at the restaurant and giving it away to the poor? In solidarity with the poor, we make sacrifices. In solidarity with the planet, we make sacrifices. For example, such as not using our water as if there's no end to it. Not using oil as if there's no end to it. Not using electricity as if our abundant use of these things has no impact on other people. We don't like thinking about this, though, do we? How do the decisions we make a difference in other people's lives? The people we can't see, the people who are affected in other parts of the world by the way we live aggressively and selfishly and abundantly with the resources that come from our planet, with the resources that come from the jobs that we have, using the talents that we have. If our abundance is not being distributed to others as a gift that we receive from God because He wants us to share it, we are not united to the passion of Christ. That's a tough message. It's a real challenge, and it's a challenge for me. In the reading from one of the days of Lent, we have Luke chapter 16, starting with verse 19. It's the story about the rich man and Lazarus. You're probably familiar with that. It's a common story. It's a memorable story. Jesus says, "There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived with luxury every day. At his gate there was a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table." This is implying that he did not get to eat what was at the rich man's table. He longed for it, but it wasn't given to him. And we know it wasn't given to him because of what comes next. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and in hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus at his side. And then he begins this dialogue with Abraham where he's saying, "Have pity on me, send Lazarus to help. And if I can't be helped, then send Lazarus back from the dead to talk to my brothers before they die." But the whole point that I want to draw out of this story is that the rich man had opportunity, but was oblivious to the needs of Lazarus. Lazarus was right there at his gate, and he did not pay attention to it. He was oblivious to how what he had in abundance could be helpful to this poor man, this poor beggar. He could pass by that beggar day after day and not feel bad about ignoring him. That's what got him into hell. We need to look at, what are we ignoring? What are we blind to because it's uncomfortable to look at, or it's challenging to think about, or we're just oblivious to it? This is the challenge of learning to live the passion of Christ. Learning to live in solidarity with Christ, who cares about every person in the world and every poor person in the world, and every sin that we do against creation, and every sin that we do against the people living in our homes by not giving them enough of our time and attention, or whatever it is. So let me just encourage you to journey with me in this same challenge. Let's think about why we make sacrifices. Is it because we think it's the right thing to do, and it's going to help us grow in faith and grow in our relationship with Jesus, which is good, but that's not enough? Is it also because we care about how our sacrifices impact others? That's true Christian maturity. God bless.